Welcome to Austin Tech Connect, the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. My name is Thom Singer, and this week marks 4 years that I have been with the Austin Technology Council, and it's been an interesting ride, but we're doing a lot of fun things, and now is a really good time for you to make sure that your company is involved in supporting ATC because, in a land full of disruption, we've got to disrupt the future of what we're doing, and we need your seat at our table. So find out more information at austintechnologycouncil.org. So every week on this podcast, which by the way is sponsored by Calavista Software, a big thank you to Calavista Software for sponsoring this podcast for the whole year of 2026. We can't do anything if it's not for companies that are true community champions that step up and help us do the stuff that we do. So thank you to Calavista. But every single week on this show, we bring a variety of local leaders to come and tell their story of success, to tell a little bit about what they're up to, and then to share their thoughts on Austin and where we are and where we're going. And today we're joined by a legend. We are joined by Peter Zandan. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So for those of you who don't know Peter is someone who has been involved in the Austin tech community and the tech scene for many, many decades. He's lived here for a long time. He started several companies. He is very deep into research and looking at the data of how things happen and why they happen. And he is one of the most recent inductees into the Austin Tech Hall of Fame. So Peter, let's go into the Wayback Machine a little bit. When did you come to Austin and why?
I came to Austin in my Volkswagen van in 1977. And I just loved the town. I came because of the town and the university. I came to go to school here. And so I just had visited. I had lived in Mexico for a little while and had stopped in Austin and said, I want to come to school here. I want to live here. And I was not disappointed. It was more than I thought.
Nice.
And so, so it's been home for 40 plus years.
So what got you involved sort of in the tech world then? So after you went to school here, what did you do right after that?
Well, I actually got involved at the University of Texas. I had gotten a PhD and decided I didn't want to be an academic, that I like business better. So I went to business school. And I was so intrigued with the personal computer industry. I wanted to take courses, wanted to learn about it and everything else. And guess what? I couldn't find it in the business school. They liked mainframes and minis, and they thought it was just a hobby, sport, and didn't give it any credibility. So I had to go over to the library sciences to get grounded in the tech business, or at least in the PC business. And really, it was there were no books. We just basically read magazines, and it was an incredible discussion. And my eyes just kept getting bigger and bigger, learning about technology. So when I finished, I was unemployable. No one wanted someone who showed up to an interview in Birkenstocks and long hair. So I figured the only thing I could do was start my own company.
Nice. So at the Hall of Fame, you told a story about how you kind of got your term sheet for one of your companies when you really went into sort of that venture funded world that you really didn't know a lot about venture funding. Why don't you retell the story of sort of the serendipity of being in the right place in the right town at the right time in the right town, and really having just that collision that led to opportunity?
Yeah, good question, Tom. To put it bluntly, I didn't know shit about other than what maybe I learned a little bit in business school, but I didn't understand how the world worked. I was strong at my skill, which was data and research, but I didn't know how the financial world worked. It was still kind of just a mystery to me. And, I started building a company, and all of a sudden, people were kind of knocking on our door saying, could we fund? Everything was out of town. So we talked and listened, and some people, it was an interesting time. And we had kind of, in the company, kind of made a decision to get some funding from a Boston VC firm. And so the weekend, I've got 2 kids, Noah and Gabrielle, and watching Gabrielle play soccer. Like people do, and, chatting to a friend, another parent on the sideline about, we got these folks knocking on our door. And so Ken DeAngelis, we knew about Austin Ventures, but Ken DeAngelis was not a very passive person. He heard the discussion, and, he talked about their strategy was to own Austin. He heard that some other venture fund was going to be investing in Austin, so he came over and talked to me a little bit, asked, just a few questions. And, I was kind of surprised because, hey, this was a soccer game and it wasn't a meeting in a conference room. And so he listened and he said, okay, Peter, we'll give you a term sheet on Monday. And at the time it was fax machines. And so he sent over a very simple, I think it was a page and a half at the most, and basically said, we'll do this. And so, I talked to, Brian Sharples, who at the time was my president, and we just decided to go for it. And kind of the rest was history because they were a great partner. We had Bill Wood on our board and they were there for us and really helped us navigate the bigger world of investment banking and a public offering, which we eventually did.
Sure, absolutely. So you founded a couple of companies back in the day here in Austin. Give us the summary of those.
Well, my first was IntelliQuest, which was a data market research company that serviced the tech industry. And I ran that for 15 years, took it public, was too tired of it, decided I liked being an entrepreneur more than running a public company. So I started a company called Zilliant, which is still around today in Austin. That works. It was interesting at the time. I just was doing a machine learning company. I didn't realize it was AI and all the hype was not around it. But in my mind, I'd worked out that you could do software and real-time data analytics, and with some learning going on, that you could provide a service to corporations. So I did that. And then I kind of took a detour after about 7 years from that. It was going well. And started working with a company called Public Strategies, Jack Martin, Ann Richards, and a lot of other folks, Mark McKinnon in Austin. And it was just a very different world for me. But what was fun about it is I still had my skill, which was data. So I was able to go to companies, everything from, Goldman Sachs to Martha Stewart and all these other out of tech industries, but bring technology and data into them. And that was a great ride. And I ended that, and as I'm aging up, and then my son asked me, would I be willing to start a company with him and my son Noah? And I said, well, how could I say no? And I said, but I put two criteria on it. Is one, he had to be in charge, not me, because I'd seen too many fathers hire their kids, and I don't think that's a healthy relationship. I think it's better for the kid to hire the. And then also, we need to talk a lot. Just to make sure, just have honest conversations about when I was stepping on his toes and when I thought he was off the trail. And so he did that. And the company Quantified AI, it works well. It's one of the 50 fastest growing AI companies in the country right now, according to Inc. Magazine. So those are the three ones that I've, started or helped start.
Nice. Well, you mentioned your son, Noah. I just realized that you are the only father and son to have both been guests on Austin Tech Connect. I interviewed Noah maybe a year and a half ago, maybe a little longer. I'll try and find the link to that and put it in the notes so anybody who's listening can just click over and listen to that. Because that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't think I've ever thought about that of having a father-son, but there is a whole second generation.
Yeah, well, hey, how about this? We're going through generations in Austin.
That's what I was going to say.
Why not?
Becky Taylor's son is working in tech and has a great job, and all of these people, it's sort of the second generation now of sort of tech leaders whose parents were running the show 30 years ago, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, and for a while I had a philosophy which was, oh no, you let the kid have their own thing and type of a thing, and I thought nepotism and family run businesses were just kind of they weren't right. And boy, I've changed my perspective on that 180 degrees. It's a wonderful relationship and a wonderful way to keep something going.
Yeah.
So I hope everyone gets it if they have kids. If they get a chance to work with their kids at some point in their life, it's a blessing.
Well, I'm a big fan of Noah. He's a good guy. He's building a really good company, and he and I kind of had a little connection because he's a Dartmouth alum. And at the time I interviewed him, so it must have been 2 years ago, my daughter was just about to graduate from Dartmouth. So I knew a lot of Dartmouth's a very cliquey little school, and he and I were able to talk about it. Yeah. Well, if you meet someone who went to Dartmouth, they'll tell you they went to Dartmouth. And they'll tell you it's where beer pong was invented. They'll work those two things into the conversation.
There you go. Yeah. Noah has a lot of respect for you, Tom.
Nice.
A lot of respect.
He's awesome. So anyway, you talk about data. Not a lot of our successful, generational entrepreneurs here in town have PhDs. There's a couple. James Truchard and a few others come to mind, who is also in the Hall of Fame. But it's sort of a rarity to have somebody who's that much of an academic also be someone who can have that entrepreneurial thing. Why do you think you were able to do both?
Good question. So I went through a pretty interesting evolution. When I first went to school, I wanted to. My goal was to change the world. My goal was to, work for the United Nations, do analytics for them, and I just thought, the world needed my help, and intellectually, that's where I was. Big picture. But then I kind of got a glimpse of my future participating in a UN conference, and I said, God, I don't want to do this. And I realized my heart was in business. My head was in changing the world. So, in my upper 20s, I decided I was going to listen to my heart over my head. And that's what pulled me over to the business school. Because I'd realized I had always done business. I mean, I supported myself, didn't grow up with much. So I always had to pay the bills and everything from house renovations to, importing goods from Mexico. I just did whatever I needed to pay the bills. And I loved it. I really loved it. And so, it's almost, I never really saw myself as an academic. I liked operating in the world more than thinking about the world.
So you just said something that might be the title of this episode, and that was you listen to your heart over your head. Why do you think that's an important thing? Because so often entrepreneurs and business leaders get caught up in their head. Why should they be listening to their heart?
Yeah, good question. And going through business school, you could tell a lot of the folks in business school, business was something they wanted as a career, but it wasn't in their heart. I mean, I just remember sitting in the front row of every class going like, I want to know all of this. I was really, really curious. And the stories of the entrepreneurs and things like that. So, I just think that, if business is not in your heart, it's got to be a hard trip. If you want to be successful and that's your goal, it's just so much harder to start businesses. I've seen it, as people open their door and say, hey, I want to make a lot of money, and so I'm going to go into business. That's just not where I was. I mean, it's fortunate that a byproduct of doing what I liked was worked. But I really think that most people, their heart is to help others, and that's their primary. And mine still, it's there. It's certainly in my heart. But I just love business. I love transacting, creating things that people want. I enjoy it.
Well, and around Austin through the last, I've lived here 35 years, we have seen people like yourself. You mentioned, the person, Brian, who is helping you with the company, a lot of the VCs funded, Austin Venture funded VC entrepreneurs of the day. When they'd exit one company, like yourself, they'd go and start another one, and then they'd start another one, and then they'd be on 3 or 4 boards, and they'd mentor because they had that love. We've also seen the people who got a big exit and sort of disappeared, bought a ranch in Montana, and we've never heard from them again. So yep. I think that maybe you can't tell in the first round who is in love with business and solving the problems, but you can tell who's on the 3rd and 4th round, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I never got enough. I still do business, at my ripe age of 73. I'm still curious about it. It's kind of what, makes my brain tick. And yeah, I know some of those folks in Montana or wherever, wonderful people, but they had enough. They had just had enough. And both financially and also, running a business is damn hard. Sure. Building a business is damn hard. So yeah, no, I get it. And I think the fact that I'm still enjoying business shows that it's embedded in me.
So you're kind of what they used to call sort of a data wonk. You like the data, you like to delve into it. Several years ago, and you and I kind of knew each other, back in the day, but we got to know each other a little bit more recently. But I remember when the Zandan Report came out, and I don't remember if it was every year, every other year, but I remember it was really good data about what was happening within the tech ecosystem and the growth of Austin. Tell everybody what the Zandan Report is, I guess, because I know Noah has been running it now for a while, and why you felt that was important.
Yeah, so my career was pretty much providing data to large companies and corporations and whatever. And I enjoyed that. But I also, I recognized the power of having that information for decision making. And data is power. It's not wisdom. And I think that's a really important point for me to make. It's like data doesn't make the decisions, but it informs people to make better decisions. And so IntelliQuest had gone public, and I'm kind of picking my head up, and I did a few things with the community because I felt like I was missing out on the community. It had done so much for me. I wanted to, give something back. And really the only thing I could bring back is my skill. And I realized that really no one was doing a poll of Austin, Texas. And at the time in the 90s, we were going through such changes. There was such a, pro-growth, anti-growth debate. Everyone was worried about quality of life and, still going on. But it was just so new to the community and two sides, and they didn't really talk well to each other. And so I said, why don't I provide data to really, quantify what's going on in people's minds about change in Austin, quality of life. Were they thinking about leaving? Did they want to put deeper roots in? And, who are these folks and everything else? And so I think it was 98, I decided that this would be a wonderful gift to the city. So I financed it myself, did the work myself. I had a team at IntelliQuest to help me. And the community, once they started going like, oh, whose side are you on? I said, I'm on the side of data. I'm just, this is just a gift. And so it got absorbed by, the mayor, Chamber of Commerce. Everyone was just going like, wow, an objective view. And it was really helpful for Austin to use the data as a way to talk about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so then, we do it, every few years. Because we tried to do it every year. The data didn't change that much.
Doesn't change enough, right?
Yeah. No. So it's, the headline was the same one every time. So we do it every 3 or 4 years. Okay. We try and change the topics, keep it fresh. I just think it's a good way for Austin to look at itself objectively rather than, who's campaign, who's lobbying, who's got an agenda.
Yeah, no, and that's true because you find in lots of cities, especially growth-oriented cities that are going through a lot of change, there's a lot of people who have egos, and there's a lot of people who have agendas, and that's just human nature. But the data is going to speak for itself. And so I remember back in the late 90s, and that every time it would come out, it was always a worthy read. And I'm not a data guy, I'm not an attention to detail guy, but the way you did it made it really understandable. And I know when Noah released the last one, I read the whole thing cover to cover.
Yeah, and the hardest, Tom, the hardest part is getting the right topics. And if you get living there, or here, you get a sense of what people are talking about. And then if you go quantify that, you shed light on their discussion. So instead of it just being, theoretical, it actually becomes, this is what people think.
Yeah. So you're still involved, the ripe old age of 73, as you said. I wasn't going to say it, but you said it. So you're still doing stuff. When we called you and told you you were going to be put into the Austin Tech Hall of Fame, I think your words were, wow, that's great. I'm not done yet. And so, you're doing a lot of things. There's one I would like to sort of address because it's a little out of the box. You spent a decade on the board of Meow Wolf. Tell everybody not everybody knows what Meow Wolf is. I do. I was an early visitor to Meow Wolf in New Mexico, and now there are locations all over the place. Tell everybody what it is and how and why you got involved. What's the connection?
Yeah, so I have had a second home here in Santa Fe for decades, and that's why I'm between here and there. I still consider Austin home, but I'm here quite a bit of the time. And so I'm involved with the community, and there's it's a great community here. And so I went to a fundraiser, and at that fundraiser, there were a bunch of creatives dancing, showing art, talking gibberish. And it was one of the most creative things I'd ever heard. And I just started scratching my head going like, what are these folks doing? And it was a fundraiser for them. And I was there with my wife, Lonnie, and she goes, oh, this is great, Peter. We need to make a donation. We need to, put money into it. So I kind of shrugged and said, well, let me talk to them a little bit, and met with the founders. And it was an art collective. I mean, it was so not Austin. I mean, it was organic. It was artists. It was no business model whatsoever, other than they had done a few things and people had shown up to listen to them. So they needed to raise some money. And I listened, and the more I listened, I said, wow, I don't exactly know what this thing is, but I love the people and I want to see them succeed. And so when I wrote a check, I literally said to Lonnie, I said, Lonnie, I don't know if this is an investment or a donation, but no matter what, I'm happy with it. And I guess, because of my background and everything else, they asked me to be on the board, which I gladly accepted. And it's been a 10-year ride. And that thing, which started off pretty much as a amorphous art collective that didn't quite know what they were going to produce. They now have 5 exhibits, one in Dallas, one in Houston, one in Denver, one in Las Vegas, and one here. We're finishing up one in LA, and there'll be one in New York in a couple of years. We've already have a lease and starting to work on that. And so far, 13 million people have gone through that experience, which, for Santa Fe, which is a small town of 90,000, there really isn't an investment community here. There isn't, all the knowledge that a town like Austin now has. And it really was organic. It was from Santa Fe. The art is from Santa Fe. The imagination is from Santa Fe. The creativity is from Santa Fe. And, we've been able to export it, and it's working.
No, it's like I said, it was an experience. And I know we went like 10 years ago or so in Santa Fe. And my son-in-law is a mathematician. My son-in-law is one of the smartest mathematicians of his generation. And he is a problem solver. I mean, he's a quant for a hedge fund. He's a brilliant young man. But to watch his mind solve problems, and the rest of the family, we were at Meow Wolf going, wow, this is weird, opening up refrigerators that were slides, and, there was tech and there was analog, and, you could sort of figure out there was a puzzle going on, but you could just gawk at the art, which is what we were doing. In the meantime, he is sitting there reading the little newspapers he's trying to figure out the problem. And it was kind of fun to see that you could either be the problem solver who's diving into the data and figuring it out, or you could just be enjoying the beautiful and wacky and weirdness of being in the experience. And that's what I walked away with, is it was a little bit of something for everybody, no matter where you fell on that spectrum.
Yeah, the Meow Wolf is very deep. It started with philosophical thinking about digital versus analog and experiential. And so, I'm learning from them more than any other, exchange, and understanding, I think, a bit of the future, which is what do humans need in the world? Because people show up there to go experience something all in. It's interactive. There's nothing in there you can't touch. There's big things, there's little things. And there's a narrative that it's a mystery and you have to listen and figure it out. And there's clues throughout the exhibit. We're doubling down on that because a lot of people do like that, use their brains, and other people are just more experiential. And so, I'm learning, I think, what entertainment is going to become, which is that mix of analog and digital that gives you a great experience.
So that leads into another question, and that is, we are at a time of, I hate to use buzzwords, but disruption and change. Where do you see the greater world today with this whole change from analog to digital, and humans and AI, and people being, pushed aside or lost, or people standing up saying we want the humanity back? Where do you see the world?
Yeah, good question. Probably the most important question for humans. I think we will move through this, but it is so disruptive. I mean, I don't think we're going to lose jobs. We're just going to change jobs. I don't think we're going to stop thinking. We're just going to have a thinking partner. I would say I'm pro AI. I think it's going to potentially make the world a better place. I'm aware of all the risks, and I think they need to be managed. But I also think what it does, and maybe this is a little rose-colored, but I don't mind wearing, rose-colored glasses, is I think it's going to force humans to do more thinking and use more judgment and use more humor and use more ethics. Because a lot of our thinking, which has taken up most of our time, or knowledge more than thinking, the knowledge is going to be, we got an assistant now, if not a lead, when it comes to knowledge. And so what are humans going to do? We have to add value to what's going on. And one thing, again, that AI does not have yet, and I still can't quite see it happening, is wisdom. Because really behind AI, it's just the data. It's just data. And data, again, is just, it's knowledge. but it's not decision making. It's not, it doesn't bring in experience or any of those kinds of things.
Right.
So, I am optimistic that the world could be a better place. Time will tell. And I'm worried about some folks being left behind and those kinds of things.
Sure.
But all in all, I think it could be an incredible partner for humanity.
So it's interesting. A couple times, you brought up wisdom, you brought up knowledge in a couple different areas, and something I talk about when I give a speech about this whole, the human side of business is I talk about the fact that most of my life, and I ask the audience, complete this sentence: knowledge is blank, and the audience will shout out power. And I say, right, for most of my life, we always said knowledge is power. But if we all now have the same access to knowledge, right? I mean, you could pick any topic.
Right, it gets democratized.
And a topic I know nothing about today, ChatGPT, Claude, and Copilot and I could sit down and spend the weekend together, and I could give a speech on that topic, and most of the audience wouldn't know that I didn't have more than 48 hours of experience, because I could gain access to the knowledge. I could, find ways to say the knowledge, and I could give a speech, because I'm a good speaker, that would sound convincing. So if knowledge isn't power, what is it? And I basically talk about that, knowledge is just the price of admission now, because we all are going to have the knowledge. So
right.
If it's the price of admission.
Tom, what will be power? You don't mind me asking you a question, because that's what I do for a living.
Take over my show. Take over my show, Peter. It's great. I believe that it's the relationships and the real human basis that you had. I did a little poll. It wasn't, it wasn't scientific level. But I said that of everybody you're connected to on LinkedIn, the last time someone provided you with a real lead, a real opportunity, something like that, did you know them very well? Did you know them kind of well? Kind of know them? Did you not know them at all? Or nobody has provided me a worthy opportunity lately? And the interesting thing was almost 75% of the answers were I knew them well or I knew them sort of. 9% was from, strangers helped them out. But then 17% that was left was nobody has really helped me out. So what I say is, look, we have focused on technology and we have focused on productivity for over a decade. And that's great. I mean, look at what it's done to the GDP. Look at what it's done to everything. But it's also created a class of what I call efficient strangers. And if we're efficient strangers, we're leaving opportunities behind. So I think it's what I call human interaction. HI is the secret in an AI world. It's your network, it's your brand, and it's the trust that you build.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I have a model that I use, and it's evolved, and it's actually philosophical, and it came from the Greeks. How's that? And that it's kind of like saying who's a prophet, which I think is a great question. Who has wisdom, who has knowledge, or not knowledge, who has wisdom? And Maimonides was one of the philosophers I've read a lot about and from, and he said there were three things. He said, the first one is knowledge. And he goes, you need to know.
Yep.
And again, AI is filling that, component. But he said, but that's not wisdom. That's not, Second one is experience. And you need that experience, whether it's, human interaction or watching things work or not work. But I think he puts a level of, he says, knowledge is the most important piece. But right there is experience. And then he adds a third, which is imagination. And he defines imagination more actually as reasoning, as kind of like putting things together. And so his take is, and I love it. I love it as a model, because when I talk to folks, I go, do they have the knowledge, or do they have access to it? It's just, are they knowledge based? And then you want to know what they did. And I like knowing everything from, their origin story to their work experience. It's much deeper than just, what's your resume? And then the last one is you ask people things out of the box and see how they cope with it. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of like that model, and I'm using it more and more, and it works. It really does work. And I think experiential, which goes back to Meow Wolf, is going to become more and more important. And then learning that judgment component, that imagination, is going to become more important. Because like you said, that, it's this knowledge is just going to be a commodity.
Well, and one of the things you talked about when you were talking about, thinking, and this, you mentioned, humor and just being able to just be yourself, laugh at things around. One of the things I did several years ago is I started doing stand-up comedy. Nobody is going to give me a Netflix special. I'm not that good at it, but I'll go to open mic nights almost every week. In 8 years, I've done 250 open mic nights. and I've been in a couple of shows, but only as the opening comic, the least funny of the 3 or 4. But it makes me better in everything else I do, because it's the hardest use of the spoken word. And most things we do in business, if you're mediocre, you don't fail. But if you're standing up telling jokes and no one laughs, there's only you made them laugh or you didn't. There isn't, well, he tried really hard. There's no fine line in that. And so I find the stand-up comedy has really been one of the things that makes me think differently.
Yeah, smart. I wish I had that ability. I can't tell a joke or any of those things.
I don't know that I do it well.
Well, one thing I substitute funny for is silly. Anyone can be silly.
Nice.
So people who know me know that, just throw some kids in front of me and I just love being silly. But you're right. I think, those human traits are going to become more important. I believe are going to become more important.
I mean, that's my whole belief is that it's all going to be more important than it ever has been, because it's going to be that differentiator that AI can't replace. So real quick, I was going to go into close, but I got one more question. Because we've talked about the fact that you're 73 and you're still involved in these creative things. You're learning new things. You're looking at the entertainment industry now through Meow Wolf's eyes. You're helping, Noah with his company. You're investing in all these other companies. Ageism is a real thing in tech. And yet, when I see people like yourself, you've transitioned that a little bit. How do we get around that as a society? And we've got these people who have all this experience and all this wisdom, and yet the tech industry tends to think that you got to be 25 to be creative.
Well, I think that in many respects that's true. It's a good question, Tom. And I'm not sure of the answer yet. How's this as I move forward? But I do realize that the less I compete with young minds, the better. So I have to remind myself that I'm not here with young people. They know more. It's their world, and I do lean on them. And I use the term, I get schooled all the time, and I think that's really, really powerful. And again, what I bring to the table, I think, is experience and reason. And I think younger folks who should be running the world, I think older folks, excuse me, should back off. I hate it when these.
Could you tell our political parties that?
Yeah, I know. I was just going to go there. It's like, stop it, please. Once you're, 65 is, the right retirement age, and get out of the arena. But I think, we do have a lot of experience. We bring something to the table. I think young people like having older people around who aren't competing with them. And so I think the goal is to listen and give feedback and not feel it's been so hard for me running companies, not being the decision maker and being the decision support. Noah's been my teacher on that. And it's a wonderful role because I think you can play it out, for years. And as long as, you're supportive and help and you bring experience to the table, it works. Nice. It works.
So the last question I sort of ask everybody on the show is let's take a quick lens on Austin. I mean, you've been here longer than I have by 15 years. And I've 35 years, I thought was a long time. So when we look at Austin, where are we today? What are we doing well? And what do we need to watch out for?
Yeah. Give that a little bit of thought. Mm-hmm. Because when I showed up in Austin, it was a very different town than it is today. Oh, for sure. And I always say it's gotten better. I mean, there was so little opportunity in Austin that kids would grow up there and then leave for jobs. No one was showing up to Austin. So, youth is really the pipeline to growth and evolution. And so that, during the 80s and 90s, that's when that changed slowly but surely. And then, we went through a place where we didn't quite fit what we were becoming. And so we needed to change. And now I think the city is filled with grown-ups, people who know what they're doing, talented. We got resources. We got, so much going for us. At the same time, why I went to Austin was because of quality of life. It was more than a tech town. And so part of what I've done or did is I was very involved with Austin City Limits, with the school system, things like that. So my take is that it still has the magic. I always worry that the magic will be, that the money in the tech world will overtake that magic. And, I love the whole debate. Do we want to be another Silicon Valley? And the answer is not no. It's hell no.
Hell no.
We want to be a better Austin. And I think, Austin does pay attention to not only the technology, but also the human side. And I think that's maybe our special role on the planet, is that we not only are pushing the technology, but not leaving humans behind.
Nice. Well, Peter, congratulations on being inducted into the Austin Tech Hall of Fame. We're at the Austin Technology Council. I'm really proud of that program. I think that you have to honor the past, you have to be present in the now, and you have to look to the future. And I think that's what we're trying to do with that program, with putting in 8 of the foundational people who should have been honored decades ago, having a current inductee into the Hall of Fame, and then having our first-time founder award connected directly to it. What were your thoughts about the Hall of Fame this year?
How about this, Tom? First, thank you so much for doing it, because it wouldn't have happened. And there's a lot of, I like how you're doing it. But for me, the experience, because I'm not going to a lot of networking meetings and things like that anymore. But it was a thing of beauty, because the balance between honoring the past but paying attention to the future is really, there needs to be some folks in Austin who are doing that. And, it was a little bit like a class reunion, because most of the folks who have been inducted or were have been friends. And I just, know them, they're friends, I like them, but there's not a reason to come together and look back. And I think the more Austin, it doesn't, obviously it's better to look forward, but looking back is valuable for a community to stay a community. So you doing that and people supporting that is a wonderful thing. So I just felt like, wow, I started remembering a lot of things and a lot of wonderful things that have happened over the years.
Nice. Well, if anybody's interested, there is a website, austintechhalloffame.com, where we list all of the people who have been inducted over these 3 years. ATC had attempted to do something similar over a decade ago, and there were 2 people who were honored, so we've included them in this round of that. So there's a little over 30 people who've been honored so far. I call it an 8-year launch, because there's probably 80 people we need to honor before we can reframe it into being more of like a current type thing. So we've got a few more years to go. I probably won't be running it for the next 5 years, but I've spelled out where I think it needs to go for that long. So hopefully,
well, you've given an incredible foundation. So thank you.
I'm very proud of it. So it's something I think that Austin, there's a lot of people who are new to town who, when I ask people, when did the tech boom begin? The number one answer is 5 years before I moved here. So it's like, it doesn't matter when someone got here, they thought tech was new, and we can actually trace it back to the 60s that we've been on this trajectory of growing tech. So anyway, congratulations to you, and thank you for your support of that. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened to the show. I'll tell you what, we ran a few minutes long, but when you have a legend online, you just keep going. But we'll be back next week with another interview. Please make sure you continue to share this podcast with other people in your network. Our numbers are growing, and that's because people are talking about the show. So keep telling people about it, and we'll see you next week on Austin Tech Connect.